The Force is light and full of shadows.
Before we dive in, check the link in the description if you want exclusive Timelines members-only videos you won't find on YouTube, all on our Patreon. The Senate apartment building on Coruscant. The exterior glass elevator, rising through amber twilight. The city planet stretches in every direction. An ocean of light and metal and movement that never sleeps, never quiets, never ends. Inside the elevator, Anakin Skywalker stands next to Obi-Wan Kenobi. Vader's consciousness slams into the body mid-breath. Not a gradual awakening. Not a slow dissolve from one life into another. One moment there is nothing. The cold, infinite nothing of a man who died in the arms of his son on a Death Star that no longer exists. And then, there is everything. Heat behind the eyes. The pull of gravity on muscle and bone. Air moving into lungs that do not require a respirator to draw it. Lungs. He breathes. The sensation is so foreign that it takes 3 full seconds before his mind catches up to what his body already knows. He is breathing on his own. No mechanical bellows. No filtered recycled air cycling through a black mask. Just breath. Warm and unassisted and real, filling a chest that is whole. The hand he raises to his face has 5 fingers. Flesh and blood, not plastoid and durasteel. He turns it over slowly. The skin is young, unmarked at the palm, without the burn scars that defined his hands for more than 2 decades. He watches the fingers flex and curl with a stillness that would alarm anyone observing him. Obi-Wan is observing him. Anakin? The voice comes from his left. Familiar. Warm. Alive. Are you all right? Vader does not answer immediately. The strategic part of his mind, the part that survived Mustafar, survived the Emperor, survived 23 years inside a suit that turned a man into a weapon, that part is already working. Cataloging, cross-referencing, building the map, the elevator, the apartment building, the amber light of a Coruscant evening settling over the cityscape beyond the glass. He knows this moment. He lived this moment. The details surface from memory with the precision of a military briefing. They are here to protect Senator Padmé Amidala from an assassination attempt that will come tonight, through the window, in the form of 2 Kohuns delivered by a shape-shifting bounty hunter. This is Attack of the Clones. The calculation arrives fully formed before his next breath is complete. He is 19 years old. The body around him is 19 years old. Every scar Mustafar left on him does not yet exist. Every limb the war took has not yet been taken. His midi-chlorian count, over 20,000 per cell, the highest ever recorded, is untouched by damaged tissue, unfiltered by a suit designed to keep him functional rather than powerful. He is, for the first time in decades, whole. The Force doesn't simply return to him. It erupts. It surges through channels that were never destroyed, only buried under decades of grief and machinery and the Emperor's careful management of his power. The sensation is not gentle. It is a dam breaking. It is every river in the galaxy finding the sea simultaneously. He stops himself, locks it down, disciplines it the way only a man who has spent 23 years learning to exist inside a cage could discipline anything. Because Obi-Wan is watching him. Fine, Vader says. The voice that comes out is young, lighter, free of the resonant baritone the respirator manufactured. But the cadence, the flatness, the economy of the word, that is not a 19-year-old's answer. That is Darth Vader's answer. He adjusts. Softens the edges. Sorry, I lost my focus for a moment. Obi-Wan's eyes linger a half-second longer than they should. Then the warm smile returns, the one that never fully understood how much it was trusted, and he looks back toward the elevator's rising progress. Vader looks at his reflection in the glass. The young face that stares back at him is angular and unlined. He is not the man he became. He is not quite the boy he was. He is something the galaxy has no name for yet. A dead man looking out of a living face, carrying the weight of a future that hasn't happened, in a body that doesn't know what it survived. The Kohuns are already in Padmé's room. He knows this with the same certainty he knows his own name. Both of them. The one he was born with, and the one he chose. The creatures are moving now, slow and patient and silent, crossing the floor toward the bed where she sleeps. The assassin hovers outside the window, guiding them through the glass with a remote. He has approximately 40 seconds. The elevator doors open. Vader steps out first. Coruscant, the apartment corridor. The hallway outside Padmé's suite is quiet. Soft light, neutral walls, the distant hum of the city far below. A Jedi's posting. A diplomat's home. The kind of stillness that announces itself too loudly. He doesn't run. Running would require explanation. He walks at a pace that is 3 steps faster than Obi-Wan expects. And by the time his master begins to register the urgency, Vader is already at the door. He reaches out with the Force before his hand touches the panel. He can feel them. 2 biological signatures. Small and cold-blooded, radiating the flat predatory focus of creatures following scent. They are on the bed. They are close to her neck. The window is sealed, but the assassin is outside it. And there is a third consciousness beyond the glass, human and focused and beginning to realize something is wrong. He opens the door. The room is dim. Padmé lies still in the bed. The 2 Kohans, pale, segmented, each the length of a forearm, have reached her pillow. Vader raises his hand. The Force moves through him like something that was always this easy, like the last 23 years were the aberration, and this effortless command, is simply what he is. Both creatures leave the bed simultaneously. They hang in the air, suspended, chittering against the telekinetic hold. He closes his fist. The sound stops. He lets them fall. The window explodes inward as Obi-Wan ignites his lightsaber and leaps through the glass, chasing the assassin into the open air of Coruscant. The sound is enormous in the sudden silence. Padmé's awake now, upright in the bed, her hand on the blaster she keeps under the pillow, a politician's reflex, a survivor's instinct. She looks at the 2 creatures on the floor. She looks at Vader. They were already on the bed, she says. It is not a question. Yes, he says. The dark eyes move between him and the shattered window and the creatures on the floor, calculating with a speed that he forgot, that he let himself forget, because grief has a way of reducing people to the wounds they left behind rather than the full living force they were. Padmé Amidala at 24 is not a tragedy waiting to happen. She is sharp and alive and watching him with an expression that is not quite gratitude and not quite suspicion. It is something in between, something that will require careful navigation. You knew, she says. Vader looks at the window. Through the shattered glass, the lights of Coruscant blur and glitter across the endless dark. Somewhere out there, Obi-Wan is chasing a bounty hunter through the shipping lanes, following the thread that will unspool into Kamino, into the clones, into the war that was designed from the beginning to destroy the Republic it claimed to defend. He knows every step of what comes next. He doesn't answer her question. Not directly. Get dressed, Vader says quietly. Obi-Wan will want to debrief when he returns. She holds his gaze for 3 full seconds. Then she nods and reaches for her robe, and the moment passes, filed away in the precise analytical mind of a woman who forgets nothing and questions everything. He turns back to the window. The foundation of everything, every plan, every decision, every sacrifice that is coming, begins here, in this room, in this breath. Palpatine is alive. The Clone Wars haven't started. The chips haven't activated. Order 66 is still a contingency sleeping in the minds of 200,000 soldiers who do not yet know what they will be ordered to do. He has time. For the first time in his life, Darth Vader has time. He breathes. The Coruscant sky lanes at night. A river of light moving in every direction at once, speeders stacked 100 levels deep. The city breathing through its traffic the way a living thing breathes through its lungs. Cold air at this altitude. The wind cuts. Obi-Wan Kenobi falls through it at terminal velocity, one hand locked around the assassin's wrist. He does not panic. That is the first thing to understand about Obi-Wan Kenobi. He does not panic. He calculates. He adapts. He trusts the Force to provide what logic cannot. And he holds on. The assassin twists in his grip, a human form that shifts and blurs at the edges, the natural tell of a Claudite whose concentration is breaking under the pressure of freefall. A speeder materializes beneath them. Anakin's speeder. Obi-Wan lands in the passenger seat with the controlled grace of a man who has survived worse, which he has, and looks immediately at the driver. The driver is not Anakin Skywalker. The driver is something wearing Anakin Skywalker's face, the same angular jaw, the same hands on the controls. But the eyes looking back at him through the Coruscant wind are not the eyes of the young man he trained. They are too still, too certain. They carry a weight that Obi-Wan has no framework to name yet, and so he files the observation away, in the part of his mind that collects things he does not yet understand. He pins the assassin. The Claudite snarls and shifts and loses cohesion, her form cycling through 3 species before exhaustion claims it. Anakin says nothing. That, too, is wrong. Coruscant, the Outlander Club. The lower levels of Coruscant are a different civilization entirely. The light from the surface does not reach here. The air is warm and close, and carries the mingled scent of 36 species, sweat and spice, and the sharp chemical undertone of cheap fuel. Music hammers through the walls of the Outlander Club, something percussive and relentless. The kind of sound designed to make conversation impossible unless you are very close to the person you are speaking with. Vader is close to no one. He stands at the bar with a glass he has not touched, watching the crowd with the systematic attention of a man running threat assessment on every exit. Old habit. The kind that kept him alive through 23 years of galactic civil war. He catalogs the room in under 10 seconds, 4 exits, 2 of which are functionally blocked by the crowd, one Rhodian near the back wall who is watching him without the casual cover of indifference a local would use, and a Gran at the far end of the bar who is not drinking his drink. Zam Wesell is here. He knows her face, knows it in both its forms. The human mask she prefers, and the Claudite truth beneath it. She is seated 3 positions down the bar, close enough that he could reach her before she registered movement, far enough that a direct approach would give her the half-second she needs to run. He waits. Obi-Wan enters first, the Force announcing him before the door opens. That particular warmth of a presence Vader has known longer than he has known almost anything else. Behind the mask. Before the mask. In the years when there was no mask, and he was still learning what it meant to be Obi-Wan Kenobi's student rather than his equal. The grief arrives as a physical sensation, the way it always does. A pressure behind the sternum. He does not name it. He does not look at it directly. He keeps his eyes on Zam. Obi-Wan reaches the bar, orders something, leans toward him in the practiced casual posture of a man who is not on a mission. "Why do I get the feeling," Obi-Wan says, his voice low under the music, "that you already know where she's sitting?" Vader picks up his glass, takes the first sip, buys 2 seconds. "Instinct," he says. Anakin. The word carries a specific weight, not accusation, not yet, but the early shape of it. The place where concern and suspicion share a border. You've been different since the apartment. We caught the assassin. You knew about the Kohuns before the door opened. The music shifts. The crowd redistributes. Zam is moving. "She's running," Vader says. He is off the bar stool before Obi-Wan finishes processing the sentence. The pursuit through the Outlander Club is not elegant. It is controlled. There is a difference. Elegance is Obi-Wan's register, the precise economy of a classically trained Jedi who treats movement as a form of expression. Control is Vader's, the blunt efficiency of a man who learned to fight inside a suit of armor, who retrained his entire combat vocabulary around leverage and power rather than speed, and who is now operating in a body with speed again and must recalibrate in real time. He catches her at the second exit, not with his hand, with the Force, a targeted grip on her center of mass, gentle enough not to injure, firm enough to stop a Claudite dead in her tracks. She spins on instinct, the blaster coming up, and he takes it from her hand before she completes the motion. The blaster disassembles in the air, components separate, he lets them drop. Zam stares at the empty space where her weapon was, then at him. The Claudite mask wavers. Fear is expensive for a species that maintains appearance through concentration, and for just a moment her true face surfaces. "Yellow, scaled, old who hired you?" Vader says. Not a question. A declaration of intent. She runs the calculation that everyone runs when they are caught between the person who hired them and the person who has caught them, weighing contract against consequence, loyalty against the look in this young man's eyes that does not match any 19-year-old she has ever encountered. "I'm more afraid of him than I am of you," Zam says. Vader leans down slightly, bringing his face level with hers. He does not raise his voice. He does not ignite anything. He simply allows the full weight of what he actually is, not the boy she sees, but the thing the boy became. The thing that burned and endured and came back, to surface behind his eyes for exactly 2 seconds. Zam Wesell has been a professional killer for 30 years. She tells him about the dart. She tells him about the man who delivered it, not a name, because she doesn't know the name, because the man who hired her uses intermediaries the way other people use words, each one keeping him one layer further from consequence. But she describes the armor. Mandalorian, she says. Old Mandalorian. The helmet a specific color she names with the precision of a woman who built a career on remembering what people look like. Vader files it. Jango Fett. Kamino, the clones. The chip, he already knows. But confirmation is not the same as knowing. Obi-Wan arrives at his shoulder, slightly out of breath, and looks between Vader and the subdued assassin with an expression caught between impressed and unsettled, the way a man looks when a student does something correctly in the wrong way. "How did you?" Obi-Wan begins. The dart enters Zam's neck from a point 3 levels above. Vader is already moving. His hand closes around the dart before Zam finishes falling, pulling it from the entry point. But the poison is fast. Kaminoan saber dart, engineered for exactly this purpose, closing off every avenue of information in under 4 seconds. He slows the biological process the only way available to him, pushing force energy through the contact point with a precision that costs him something. But it is not enough. She is gone in 3 breaths. He straightens. The dart is in his palm. He turns it once, the metalwork catching the distant light of a city that never darkens. A saber dart. Kaminoan manufacture. Completely untraceable unless you know where to look. Which Obi-Wan will, eventually, because he is Obi-Wan Kenobi, and eventually is always the word that applies to him. But Vader will find Kamino first. He needs to find Kamino first. Above them, somewhere in the stacked skylanes and the dark between levels, a Mandalorian warrior is already ascending. Mission complete. Reporting to a man who does not yet know that the variable in the equation has changed, that the boy he believed predictable has returned from somewhere the boy has never been. Vader closes his fingers around the dart. The first thread. The first pull. The war Palpatine designed across a decade of careful architecture is about to be unraveled from the inside, not with armies, not with declarations, but with the quiet, patient work of a man who already knows where every thread leads. He knows the shape of what is coming. He knows, too, that knowing is not the same as surviving it. Tatooine, the twin suns rising over the Junland wastes, painting the sand in shades of copper and bone. The horizon is flat and absolute in every direction, the kind of emptiness that makes a man feel either free or erased, depending on what he carries into it. Vader carries everything. The ship sets down 3 kilometers from the Lars homestead. His choice, not the obvious landing coordinates Obi-Wan would have selected, not the direct approach a 19-year-old impulsively certain of his own instincts would have taken. 3 kilometers out, on the far side of a ridge where the sand swallows sound and the heat distortion obscures silhouette. Obi-Wan is not with him. That required careful management. 2 days of careful management, beginning on the transport back from the Outlander Club, when Vader suggested, with the practiced mildness of a man who has spent years deploying suggestions as instruments, that the dart required immediate analysis at the Jedi Temple archives, that he would follow the only other available lead, while Obi-Wan pursued the weapon. A division of resources. Tactically sound. Obi-Wan accepted it the way he accepted most things that were logically constructed and emotionally familiar, with warm agreement and the low, persistent frequency of concern he never quite voiced. Now there is only desert. Vader walks the 3 kilometers, without rushing. The twin suns are climbing, and the heat is building, and the sand pulls at every step in the particular way Tatooine sand does. The fine grit that gets into everything, that coated the inside of his childhood like a second skin. He forgot this. Not the memory of it. He never forgot the memory of it. But the physical reality of it. The specific weight of Tatooine heat on the back of his neck. The way the light here flattens distance, makes everything look closer and further simultaneously. He walked this desert as a slave. He walked it as a Padawan, half mad with premonition, chasing dreams he couldn't stop. He never walked it as what he is now. The thought sits in him quietly, and he does not examine it further. There is work to do. Tatooine, the Lars homestead. The moisture farm emerges from the desert the way all things on Tatooine emerge, gradually, reluctantly, only revealing itself when you are already too close to turn back. The evaporators rise first. Then the dome of the entrance hatch. Then the low perimeter wall that does nothing against a determined raider, but provides the psychological architecture of shelter. Owen Lars built this homestead on the principle that something is better than nothing. Vader stops at the perimeter. He reaches out with the Force before he takes another step. She is here. The signature is faint, the Force presence of a woman who was never trained, never told she carried anything extraordinary, just the quiet, biological warmth of a life going about its ordinary business. But he knows it. He knew it before he was old enough to name what he was sensing. The first Force presence he ever learned to recognize. Before Obi-Wan, before Palpatine, before the Emperor's cold, dark gravity. Before all of it. His mother is inside the homestead. He breathes once, deliberately the way a man controls a reaction that could compromise everything if it surfaces in the wrong register. The grief and relief arrive simultaneously, the way they always do with her. Inseparable. Because every memory of Shmi Skywalker is threaded through with the knowledge of how it ended. How he found her. How she died in the original timeline with her son's arms around her, and the last thing she ever felt was him, and it was not enough. It was never enough. That is not how this ends. He crosses the perimeter and descends into the homestead. The interior is cool and dim after the blinding white of the surface. Clutter that is also organization. Tools arranged by use, parts sorted by project. The domestic grammar of a working homestead that doesn't have resources to waste. Owen Lars is in the workshop to the left, partially visible through the doorway, bent over something mechanical with the focused scowl that Vader will later recognize as an inherited trait. Beru is at the preparation counter, her back to the entrance, moving with the efficiency of someone doing three things simultaneously, and Shmi is sitting at the table in the main room. She is mending something. A piece of cloth stretched across her hands, a needle moving with the automatic precision of a task done so many times it no longer requires thought. Her hair is pinned back. She looks older than his last clear memory of her, from that timeline. The desert does that. It ages everyone it doesn't kill. She looks up. The needle stops. Vader stands in the entrance to the homestead and does not move, because the tactical, analytical part of his mind, the part that survived everything, has gone completely offline for the first time since he slammed back into this body. And what remains in its place is 19 years old, and has been looking for this woman across 23 years of loss and machinery and grief that he built an entire dark-side career on top of. Ani, Shmi says. Just that. Just his name, the diminutive no one else uses, spoken in a voice that is absolutely certain. Not shocked. Not questioning. Certain. The way a mother's voice is certain when it names the thing it has been waiting for without knowing it was waiting. He crosses the room. She stands to meet him and he holds her with the arms of a 19-year-old body and the desperation of a 45-year-old man, and she holds him back without asking why, without requiring explanation. Because she is Shmi Skywalker and she was always smarter than the galaxy gave her credit for, and she can feel something in the way her son holds her that tells her the answer to a question she isn't asking yet. The tears on her face, when he finally releases her, are not tears of pain. They are tears of relief, of joy, of a prayer answered across a distance she couldn't name. He steps back, composes himself. The analytical machinery re-engages with the particular grinding effort of a man reclaiming a tool he briefly lost. There is work to do. And there is time, Not infinite time, not comfortable time, but real time, earned time, and he intends to use it. "I need to talk to you," Vader says. And to Owen. Owen has appeared in the workshop doorway, wrench in hand, his expression carrying the default suspicion of a man who grew up on Tatooine and learned early that unexpected arrivals are rarely good news. He looks at Vader with the flat assessment of someone who has already decided to be difficult about whatever comes next. "You look different," Owen says. "I'm not," Vader says. Owen's eyes say he doesn't believe that. Owen's eyes, Vader notes, are considerably more perceptive than the galaxy remembers him being, which is the galaxy's error, not Owen's. He files it. "Sit down," Vader says. "Both of you." He does not tell them everything. He tells them enough. He tells them that Shmi is in danger, not from Tusken Raiders specifically, not yet, because the raid that took her in the original timeline is still months away, but from the general and specific fact of being on Tatooine during a war that is about to consume the galaxy. He tells Owen that he needs to start thinking about the farm's perimeter defenses, its water supply, its capacity to go invisible if something large moves through the outer rim. He tells Beru, who has come to stand in the doorway with the quiet attention of a woman who understands that she is hearing something important through the shape of what is not being said, that he will be back. Shmi listens to all of it. When he finishes, she asks one question. "Are you all right, Ani?" The question lands with the precision of something thrown by someone who knows exactly where the gap in the armor is. Because that is the question. Not what happened, not how he knows, not why he sounds like a man 3 times his age when he lays out a threat assessment. Just, are you all right? He looks at his mother. The needle still in her hand. The mended cloth on the table. The twin suns beginning their descent outside, painting the homestead walls in the first copper light of afternoon. "I will be," Vader says. She holds his gaze for a long moment, the way she always did, reading the thing beneath the thing. Then she nods, once, and sits back down, and picks up her mending. It is not an acceptance. It is a continuation. She is still there. Still alive. Still the quiet center of gravity that the dark side always knew it had taken from him. He is going to keep it that way. Outside, the sand shifts. The wind moves. The homestead holds against it the way it always has. Imperfectly, stubbornly, with the particular endurance of things that have no intention of dying. For now, that is enough. Kamino, the ocean planet that shouldn't exist in any Jedi archive. Rain hammering the landing platform in sheets so dense the atmosphere feels more water than air. The cloning facilities rise from the sea on stilts like the legs of something enormous that decided to stand still and let the planet build around it. Obi-Wan found it first, this time, exactly as he was meant to. Vader made sure of that. The message from Obi-Wan arrives while Vader is still in transit, a tight beam transmission routed through the standard Jedi encrypted channel, compressed and brief the way Obi-Wan's communications always are, when he is being careful. Clone Army. Kaminoan Commission. 200,000 units ready for Republic deployment, with 1 million more on the way. A Prime Minister named Lama Su who speaks of it all with the cheerful administrative pride of a man who has never once considered what the army is actually for. Vader reads the transmission once, then again. Then he sends a reply that takes him 4 drafts to calibrate correctly, the exact register of a 19-year-old Padawan who is surprised by this information, sufficiently impressed. Appropriately deferential to his master's lead. The gap between what he writes and what he knows is wide enough to lose a Star Destroyer in. He sends the 4th draft. He deletes the other 3. Geonosis, outer orbit. The rocky planet turns below, its surface the color of dried blood, the hive structures visible even from orbit as dark geometries pressed into the desert. Geonosis, the Foundry world. The place where, in another life, the Clone Wars began in fire and chaos and the deaths of Jedi who walked into an arena believing negotiation was still possible. He is not here for negotiation. Obi-Wan's transmission cuts out mid-sentence, the specific signature of a signal interrupted from the ground, which means his master is already captured. The Separatist command structure, the droid foundries, Count Dooku in his tower receiving reports with the aristocratic patience of a man who believes he controls every variable. He doesn't. Vader sets the ship down in a canyon 3 kilometers from the primary hive entrance, in the shadow of a rock formation that the Geonosian patrols use as a navigation marker and therefore never actually look at. He has 40 minutes before Obi-Wan's transmission reaches Coruscant. He has perhaps 6 hours before the Jedi strike team arrives. 6 hours is considerable. He moves through the canyon in the half-dark of the Geonosian dusk, keeping below the ridgelines, letting the Force map the patrol patterns ahead of him the way a hand reads a wall in darkness. Lightly, constantly, adjusting to what it finds. The Geonosians are not subtle sentries. They fly set patterns at set intervals with the rigid precision of creatures whose architecture is biological and whose individual cognition is secondary to the hive's. He slips between 3 patrols in the first kilometer without altering his pace. The hive entrance is unguarded. Of course it is. No one comes to Geonosis uninvited. And the Geonosians have had no reason yet to believe their operation has been compromised. Obi-Wan's capture was clean. From their perspective, a Jedi blundered into their network and is now contained. The Republic doesn't know where he is. The Separatist leadership believes they are hours from a comfortable execution. Vader walks through the entrance. The interior of the hive is all curved walls and amber light, the organic geometry of a species that builds the way other species breathe. Without deliberate design, by instinct, each chamber a cell in a structure too large for any individual mind to hold. It smells of minerals and something biological beneath that, the warm hive scent of Geonosians at scale. He reaches out with the Force and finds Obi-Wan immediately. Not dead. Suspended. Energy bonds, arms extended. The specific discomfort of a man who has been held immobile long enough that his body is beginning to register the strain, but not yet long enough to be physically compromised. 2 levels down, 40 meters northeast, he also finds the others. Dooku is 4 levels above, in the tower chamber where he receives his reports, where he keeps the files that will matter later, the transmission to Sidious, the Separatist command codes, the documentation of a war built on a lie. Vader marks his position and does not go there yet. He goes to Obi-Wan first. The detention chamber has 2 Geonosian guards and a security panel of Bactoid manufacture. The same hardware used in Trade Federation installations, which means the encryption is the same encryption Vader broke across 2 decades of war. He bypasses it in 40 seconds. He has broken this specific encryption model so many times that his hands move ahead of his conscious thought, muscle memory from a mind that did it constantly. The door opens. Obi-Wan looks up from his suspension bonds with the expression of a man who has been calculating escape routes and finding them all insufficient, and who is therefore deeply relieved to see a friendly face, and who is also, immediately, cataloging the fact that the friendly face arrived here without any apparent difficulty. "Anakin," Obi-Wan says. "How did you later?" Vader says. He dismantles the energy bonds with the Force, separating the current from the projectors with surgical precision, and Obi-Wan drops into a controlled landing with the physical grace of a man who trusts his body even when his body has just been hanging from the ceiling for 3 hours. "Dooku is here," Obi-Wan says. He rolls his shoulders. Assessing damage, cataloging function. He's been communicating with someone. A Sith Lord, he said. He called him Darth Sidious. "I know," Vader says. Obi-Wan stops moving. The silence in the detention chamber is the kind that accumulates weight the longer it extends. The hive sounds continue beyond the door, the distant percussion of Geonosian industry, the hum of the security system that no longer applies to them. But between the 2 of them the quiet is absolute. "You know," Obi-Wan says, not repeating it, measuring it. "I suspected," Vader says, and the correction is technically accurate in ways that are also technically useless, and they both know it. Obi-Wan looks at him for a long moment with the full attention of a man who has been teaching Anakin Skywalker for a decade and knows the exact texture of every evasion he employs. When this is over, Obi-Wan says carefully, "We are going to have a conversation." When this is over, Vader agrees. They move. The route to Dooku's tower is 4 levels up and requires passing through 2 active corridors. One carrying a standard Geonosian patrol, one carrying 3 B-1 battle droids on a circuit that intersects with the main passage every 4 minutes. Vader maps both in his head and selects the gap between them with the automatic efficiency of a man who has navigated hostile installations in active combat for longer than this body has been alive. Obi-Wan keeps pace without asking how he knows where he's going. That too is filed and not addressed. The tower chamber door is sealed with a Dooku-specific lock, the personal encryption of a man who trusts no one, not even his own allies, which is the correct instinct for a Sith apprentice operating inside a web of shifting loyalties. Vader dismantles it without ceremony and steps through. Dooku is standing at the viewport. He turns at the sound of the door, and the face that regards them is the face of a man who has factored in most contingencies and is now factoring in one he did not anticipate. The thin, aristocratic features. The white beard. The eyes of a Jedi who chose to stop being won and found, on the other side of that choice, that what waited was not freedom, but a different kind of cage. Vader looks at his Grandmaster and feels nothing except clarity. "This is unexpected," Dooku says. The voice is warm and precise, the voice of a man who was a great Jedi once and never stopped performing the part even after he abandoned it. Obi-Wan's Padawan. "And you found us so quickly. Very impressive." "Drop the lightsaber," Vader says. Dooku's eyes move between them with the assessment of a Makashi master calculating reach and positioning, and the specific vulnerabilities of two opponents at different skill levels. He lands on Vader and stays there. Something in the calculation is not resolving the way it should. Something about the young man in front of him is producing a result the formula doesn't account for. "You're not what you appear to be," Dooku says. "No," Vader says. "I'm not." The lightsaber comes up anyway. Of course it does. Dooku is a Sith apprentice in a fortress full of his allies with a separatist fleet at his disposal, and 2 Jedi, one of them a Padawan as far as he knows, have walked into his tower. The arithmetic still favors him. It is the last arithmetic error Count Dooku ever makes. Vader's lightsaber ignites before Dooku completes his opening stance, and what follows is not a duel. A duel requires 2 participants of comparable standing. What follows is an education, delivered in the language of Juyo and Gemso and 23 years of combat experience compressed into a body that is stronger and faster than it has any right to be. Dooku's Makashi is elegant, and Vader respects it the way he respects all elegant things. At a distance, without letting it matter. He disarms Dooku. The curved hilt clatters across the stone floor. Dooku stands with Vader's blade at his throat, breathing with the controlled discipline of a man who refuses to let shock register on his face, and for the first time in decades he looks at something he cannot immediately explain. "Who are you?" Dooku says. The question is genuine, not rhetorical, not a delay tactic. The man who trained Qui-Gon Jinn and studied under Yoda and spent a lifetime reading the Force like a text he knew by heart is looking at Anakin Skywalker and reading something that isn't there. Vader holds the blade steady. "Take him," he says to Obi-Wan. Outside, through the tower viewport, the first lot gunships are breaking through the Geonosian atmosphere. The Jedi strike team arriving exactly on schedule, the beginning of the Battle of Geonosis that will not, this time, be the beginning of anything except the end of Count Dooku's usefulness to Darth Sidious. The Clone Wars will not start today. Vader intends to make sure of that. Geonosis, the tower chamber, the viewport behind Dooku showing the first gunships descending through rust-colored clouds, their running lights blinking in the dusk like the eyes of something vast and patient that has finally arrived. Dooku is on his knees. That is new. Obi-Wan moves to secure him, binders from his belt, the standard restraint procedure, applied with the precise economy of a Jedi who has done this enough times to make it automatic. Dooku submits with the composure of a man filing every detail of his situation for later use. Even on his knees, even with a lightsaber at his throat, he is not defeated. He is observing, cataloging, running the calculation that Vader knows intimately because he spent 2 decades studying under the man who taught Dooku everything that mattered. Palpatine will not leave Dooku in Jedi custody. The thought arrives with the clarity of a thing already known, not a deduction. A memory. Because in the other timeline, on a different ship, In a different configuration of the same essential trap, Palpatine told him to kill Dooku, and he did. And he understood only later, decades later, in the cold clarity of a suit that gave him too much time to think, that the execution wasn't justice. It was housekeeping. Sidious eliminating the apprentice who knew too much before the apprentice could be interrogated by people equipped to ask the right questions. Dooku knows where Sidious is. Dooku knows what Sidious is. He'll send someone, Vader says. Obi-Wan looks up from the binders. What? Sidious? He'll send an extraction team before we reach Coruscant. He can't allow Dooku to be questioned by the Council. He keeps his eyes on Dooku as he says it, watching the face, watching for the micro-expression that confirms it. There, the slight tightening around the eyes, the almost imperceptible adjustment of the jaw. Confirmation. Dooku looks at him with something that has shifted from assessment into a category that requires a new name. Not fear. Dooku has too much pride and too much training for fear to surface cleanly. But the recognition of a variable that should not exist. A Padawan who moves like a war veteran, who anticipated an extraction plan that hasn't been communicated to anyone in this room, who is watching him with eyes that have seen things this face is too young to have seen. Who sent you? Dooku says quietly. No one, Vader says. You're not Council. You're not Shadow Operations. You're 20 years old and you fight like... He stops. Reassembles. Who trained you past Kenobi? The question lands in the chamber and stays there. Obi-Wan is very still. The binders are secured, but his hands haven't moved away from Dooku's wrists, and his attention has redistributed to include Vader in its radius with the careful neutrality of a man who is listening to a conversation, tell him something he hasn't decided how to process yet. Vader crouches to eye level with Dooku. I need a name, Vader says, not Sidious. I know Sidious. I need the name he uses. The identity. The face he wears in the Senate building every morning. The chamber is quiet. Below, through the floor, the sounds of the arriving Jedi strike team are beginning to filter up. The percussion of combat, the distant shriek of blaster fire, the specific resonant hum of multiple lightsabers igniting simultaneously. The Battle of Geonosis is happening without them and will resolve without them, and nobody down in that arena is positioned to care what occurs in this tower. Dooku looks at him for a long time. You already know, Dooku says. I need you to say it. Why? Because when I walk into the Council chamber with you in binders, I need to tell them something I didn't deduce. I need to tell them something a Sith Lord confirmed. There's a difference. The Council knows the difference. Dooku is silent. The aristocratic face works through something. Not the calculation of a tactician this time, but the older and slower movement of a man who spent most of his life as a Jedi, who left because he believed the Order was corrupt and the Republic was dying, and the dark side offered a clarity that the light side refused to provide, and who has spent the years since discovering that the dark side's clarity is just a different kind of blindness. He looks at Vader. He looks at Obi-Wan. He makes a decision that is not tactical, that is something older than tactic. Palpatine, Dooku says. Supreme Chancellor Sheev Palpatine. Senator from Naboo. Darth Sidious. He has been everything you trust, and nothing you believe him to be, for longer than the Republic remembers. The name sits in the chamber like a stone dropped into still water. Obi-Wan stands up slowly. The hands that secured the binders are not moving. The face that Vader has known, that he knew, that he lost, that he is standing 3 feet away from right now in a reality that is rewriting itself around every choice he makes. That face is doing something complicated. Processing a statement that restructures every assumption underneath the last decade of his life. That's Obi-Wan begins. True, Vader says. They don't make it to the ship. Of course they don't. Because Palpatine is watching, the way Palpatine is always watching, and somewhere between the tower and the canyon where Vader's ship is hidden, the extraction happens. Not a crude frontal assault, nothing that would announce itself to the Jedi strike team now swarming the lower hive, but something precise. A signal sent from the tower the moment Dooku's restraints registered on the security system. A response team already on Geonosis, already positioned, already moving. 6 figures drop from the canyon walls. They are not droids. They move like people who were trained by someone who understood that the best soldiers are the ones the enemy doesn't expect to find competent. Dark clothing. No markings. The weapons are non-standard, not Trade Federation issue, not Geonosian manufacture. Something older and quieter and more serious. Vader ignites his blade before the first one lands. He doesn't wait for them to organize. That is the lesson the Emperor spent 2 decades trying to teach him, and that he learned only in the application. Overwhelming force applied before the enemy establishes formation is not aggression. It is efficiency. He crosses the distance to the nearest 2 in one movement, his blade tracing an arc that removes the threat of their weapons without requiring him to think about it. The force is open and steady around him, flooding input, positions, vectors, the slight telegraphing of intent that trained fighters leak through their center of mass a half-second before they act. He reads it all simultaneously. He responds to what is coming rather than what is here. Obi-Wan takes the right side. His Ceresu is the correct choice for a confined canyon with projectile weapons in play, the tight defensive circles, the efficient redirects, the blade always between his body and the incoming threat. He is brilliant at it. He was always brilliant at it. Vader watches him peripherally with the specific grief of knowing exactly how good Obi-Wan Kenobi is and what it cost the galaxy to lose him. He does not lose him today. 4 down in 12 seconds. The remaining 2 break, not from cowardice, Vader notes, but from tactical reassessment. Professionals recognizing a changed equation. They go up the canyon wall with the assisted speed of magnetic grapples, and Vader lets them go. Because dead men carry no intelligence, but living ones report back. He wants Palpatine to receive this report. He wants Sidious to know that something has changed. Not what, not yet, not the full shape of it, but the fact of it. An anomaly. A disruption in the pattern he has been running for decades without meaningful interference. Let him wonder. Dooku has not moved. He stands between them with his hands bound and his face composed, watching the aftermath with the attention of a man updating his assessment in real time. "You let them go," Dooku says. "Yes," Vader says. "That's not something a Jedi does." "No," Vader agrees. "It isn't." The canyon is quiet. The twin moons of Geonosis are beginning to rise, cold light on red rock, and the distant sounds of the battle below are fading as the Jedi strike team consolidates the hive. Obi-Wan is looking at him again with the expression that has been building since the elevator on Coruscant, layers accumulating, each one a detail that doesn't resolve cleanly into the person he believes he is standing next to. There will be a conversation. Vader knows it. He has been managing its delay with the careful attention of a man who knows that some truths require the right moment. Not to protect himself, but because the truth he carries would land differently in a Jedi Council chamber than it will here, in a canyon on Geonosis, with the evidence of everything he's changed visible in the living face of a master who should, in another version of this night, be on his way to Coruscant alone with a severed arm and a war just begun. "We need to move," Vader says. They move. Above the canyon, somewhere in the dark between stars, a Sith Lord sits in an office that smells of old wood and Senate procedure, and receives a report that does not compute. He begins to recalculate. For the first time in decades, Darth Sidious recalculates. Coruscant, the Jedi Temple at night, the 5 spires lit from below by the city's perpetual glow. The ancient stone holding the light the way old things hold everything, reluctantly, incompletely, but with a permanence that outlasts the source. The council chamber at the peak sits empty at this hour. Obi-Wan has chosen the room of 1,000 fountains instead. The room is what its name promises, water moving in every direction. Channeled through stone architecture that the original temple builders designed to create white noise, to give Jedi a place where conversation would not carry. The air is humid and cool. The sound of falling water fills every frequency that silence would otherwise occupy. Obi-Wan is sitting on a bench near the central pool when Vader finds him. He has been sitting there for some time. The posture says it, not the upright, deliberate stillness of meditation, but the settled weight of a man who arrived somewhere and let the pretense of purpose go and is simply sitting with what he knows. His hands are loose in his lap. His eyes are on the water. He doesn't look up when Vader enters. "Sit down, Anakin," Obi-Wan says. Vader sits. The water moves between them. The room holds the sound of it like a closed hand. I've been thinking, Obi-Wan says, about all of it. The elevator. The apartment. Zam Wesell. Tatooine. Geonosis. He pauses. The way you fight now. The way you speak. The things you know before you should know them. He looks up. I have been your master for 10 years, Obi-Wan says. I know every version of you that exists. The boy on Tatooine. The Padawan who never stopped moving. The young man who is too certain of himself in exactly the ways Qui-Gon was too certain of himself. He stops. You are none of those people right now. Vader is quiet. I am not asking you to explain the Force, Obi-Wan continues. I am asking you to trust me with whatever this is. Whatever happened to you between the Senate apartment and now. He looks at the water. Something happened, and you have been managing it very carefully, which tells me it is significant, which tells me I should know. The water falls. The room holds it. Vader looks at his hands. The young hands. The unmarked hands that in another life were burned to nothing and rebuilt in Durasteel and served an emperor for 23 years. He looks at them for a long time. Then he tells the truth. Not all of it. Not the architecture of every battle, every death, every choice that compounded into the specific catastrophe of Darth Vader. But the structure of it. The essential skeleton that Obi-Wan needs to understand what is happening and why and what it requires of both of them. He tells him about the Emperor, not as a senator, not as a chancellor, but as Darth Sidious, the full shape of what Palpatine is and has been and intends to become. He tells him about the Clone Wars, not as a conflict about to begin, but as a designed system, engineered from both sides by a single hand, built to exhaust the Republic and destroy the Jedi and consolidate power in one man. He tells him about Order 66, the inhibitor chips in 200,000 clone soldiers, sleeping now, waiting for a command that Palpatine has already written and will give at the moment of maximum devastation. He tells him that in another version of this timeline, all of it worked. Obi-Wan listens. He does not interrupt. That is the thing about Obi-Wan Kenobi that Vader forgot, in the long years of grief and rage and the reductive mythology the Empire built around them both, that Obi-Wan's greatest capacity was never combat, never wit, never the diplomatic precision that made him invaluable to the Council. His greatest capacity was stillness. The ability to receive something enormous without letting it collapse him, to hold the weight of a terrible truth without either dismissing it or being destroyed by it. He listens until Vader stops speaking. Then he is quiet for a long time. The chips, Obi-Wan says finally. In the clones, inhibitor chips, Kaminoan manufacture, surgically implanted. Every unit. Can they be removed? Yes, Vader says. If we know they're there. If we act before the order is given. Obi-Wan nods. Slowly, the nod of a man who is not agreeing but processing, moving the information from one part of his mind to another, testing its weight, its shape, its implications. And Palpatine. The Council will require evidence. Dooku's testimony. Dooku is a Sith Lord who has every reason to implicate his own master in exchange for the saber dart, Vader says. Kaminoan manufacture. Untraceable to anyone without access to Kamino's client list. Which Dooku has. Which connects him to Jango Fett. Which connects Fett to Palpatine through the original commission for the clone army. A commission placed in the name of a Jedi Master who has been dead for a decade. Sifo Dyas. He pauses. The chain is complete. The evidence exists. It requires someone who knows where to pull the thread. Obi-Wan looks at him. You've been building this since the elevator, Obi-Wan says. Yes, how long have you had all of this? Vader meets his eyes. 23 years. The fountain runs. A bird calls somewhere in the botanical section of the room, a small automated habitat that the temple maintains for the Padawans. The sound absurdly ordinary in the context of what has just been said. Obi-Wan stands. He walks to the edge of the pool and looks into the water, his hands clasped behind his back in the posture Vader associates with his most serious thinking. The posture that preceded every important decision Obi-Wan ever made. The physical grammar of a man organizing the world inside his head. "You died," Obi-Wan says. Not a question. "Yes," Vader says. "And came back. Here, into this." "Yes, the Force sent you." Vader considers it. The word sent implies intention, implies a consciousness behind the mechanics, implies that whatever returned him to this body in this elevator on this evening made a choice rather than simply obeying a law he doesn't have the framework to name. He has thought about this in the hours between conversations and missions, and the careful management of a timeline rewriting itself around his choices. He has not reached a conclusion that satisfies him. "Something did," he says. Obi-Wan turns from the pool. His face has completed whatever process it was running. What remains is the face Vader knew best, not the young master who worried about him, not the old man in a desert hut who was keeping secrets of his own, but something in between. The face of Obi-Wan Kenobi at the moment of full commitment. When he has understood something completely, and chosen his response to it with his whole self. "Then we don't waste it," Obi-Wan says. 3 words, 4 syllables. The entire renegotiation of every assumption about what their partnership is and what it is for, delivered in the plain declarative style of a man who does not require ceremony for the things that matter most. Vader feels something shift in his chest. Not dramatically, not the cinematic resolution of 23 years of grief. Just a quiet structural movement, the way a building settles when a load-bearing element is finally correctly placed. "The Council," Vader says. "Tomorrow," Obi-Wan replies. "Tonight I need to think, and you need to tell me everything about the chips." He pauses. "Everything. Anakin. Not the version you've calibrated for your audience. Everything." Vader looks at his master, at the man who trained him and trusted him and lost him and in another life, watched his son burn him to ash on a pyre on the forest moon of Endor, and wept without being seen doing it. At the man who is standing in the room of 1,000 fountains, looking at him with complete, uncomplicated commitment to whatever comes next. "Sit down," Vader says. "It will take a while." Obi-Wan sits. The water runs, the room holds it. Outside, the city burns its permanent light against the dark, and the temple stands in it, and the council sleeps. And somewhere across Coruscant, in a residence that smells of old wood and careful ambition, Darth Sidious is recalculating. He does not know what has changed. He knows only that something has. And in the room of 1,000 fountains, 2 men who were supposed to destroy each other are instead building the architecture of his undoing, one truth at a time in the sound of falling water, through the long and necessary hours of the Coruscant night. The Jedi Temple detention level. Below the training halls, below the archives, below the layers of the temple that serve the living, a place the Order maintains, because wisdom requires acknowledging that not every problem resolves through negotiation. The cells are clean and without cruelty. The lighting is constant. The silence is absolute. Dooku has been here for 16 hours. He has spent them, as far as the monitoring equipment can determine, sitting in the precise center of his cell with his hands in his lap and his eyes open, in what the temple's records would classify as meditation, and what Vader recognizes as something else entirely. Not peace, not acceptance. The specific stillness of a man running every scenario available to him and finding, systematically, that they do not resolve in his favor. Dooku is not meditating. Dooku is waiting to see who comes through the door. Vader comes through the door alone. The cell is 6 meters by 4, a bench along one wall, a single light source overhead, recessed, impossible to reach. No furniture beyond the bench because the temple's designers understood that furniture is leverage, and the detained should have as little leverage as possible. Dooku is on the bench, back straight, hands folded, wearing the same dark clothing from Geonosis, now without the cape that served as a visual declaration of his status. Without the cape, he looks older. Vader pulls the single chair from the corridor, the monitoring chair, the one the guards use, and sets it inside the cell and sits in it and looks at Dooku without speaking. Dooku looks back. This is the first time they have been in the same room without a lightsaber between them, without the immediate architecture of combat organizing the space. Vader examines the face across from him, with the attention of a man reading a text he memorized long ago in a different language. Familiar in structure, strange in detail. In the other timeline, he met this man twice. The first time, Dooku took his arm. The second time, he took Dooku's head at the instruction of a man he trusted. He has thought about that second moment more than he has told anyone. You expected Windu, Dooku says. Windu will come later, Vader says. I wanted to speak with you first. Unsupervised, yes. Dooku looks at the door, which is closed, and at the monitoring panel beside it, which Vader disabled on his way in with a precision that required knowing exactly where the blind spot in the sensor array is, information a Padawan should not have, which Dooku notes with the slight adjustment of his chin that constitutes, for him, visible surprise. You are a remarkable problem, Dooku says. I've been told. Kenobi doesn't know what you are. The Council doesn't know what you are. He pauses. I'm not certain I know what you are, and I have a broader frame of reference than most. Vader leans forward, elbows on knees. The posture of a man who is not performing patience but actually has it. The deep, structural patience of someone who has learned that most conversations arrive at their truth eventually, if you simply do not leave. Tell me about the training, Vader says. Dooku is quiet, not the separatists, not the war architecture. I know the war architecture. He holds Dooku's gaze. The rule of two. The actual transmission. What Sidious taught you that Yoda didn't. Something moves behind Dooku's eyes. Not offense. He is past offense. Something more considered than that. Why? Because I need to understand what I'm fighting. Not the political apparatus. The dark side methodology. How he constructs loyalty. How he maintains control over an apprentice without the apprentice recognizing it as control. Vader pauses. How long did it take you to understand that you were never going to replace him? The silence that follows is a different quality than the silence before it. Dooku looks at his hands. The long fingers. The hands that built a movement and signed the documents that launched a war and held a lightsaber against more opponents than most Jedi encounter in a full career. 7 years, Dooku says. When did you accept it? I didn't. I adapted my expectations. He looks up. He never intended to be replaced. The rule of two is not a succession protocol. It is a management system. The apprentice exists to keep the master sharp. If the apprentice becomes too capable, too independent, too informed, he stops. He removes them, Vader says. He removes them, Dooku confirms. The voice is flat. Not wounded. The wound is old enough to have scar tissue over it, but honest in the way that only becomes available when the pretense of winning has been removed. He commissioned me to find the next apprentice 3 years ago. Someone younger. More powerful. More malleable. He looks at Vader steadily. He had a candidate. The air in the cell does not change. The light does not change. Vader's expression does not change. Everything else does. Describe the candidate, Vader says. The voice is level. The voice of a man who already knows the answer and needs the confirmation for reasons that are not emotional and are entirely emotional simultaneously. Young, exceptional midi-chlorian count, already in proximity to the Order's leadership. Dooku's eyes move across Vader's face, with the precision of a man who has just assembled a picture from pieces he has been holding separately. Strong enough to do what Sidious required. Broken enough, he believed, to be directed. The word broken lands in the cell and stays there. Vader is quiet for a long time. He was wrong about that, Vader says finally. Was he? Dooku replies. And the question is genuine, not rhetorical, not cruel. The honest inquiry of a man who is looking at the evidence in front of him and finding it genuinely ambiguous. Vader stands. He moves to the viewport, a narrow slit in the cell wall that shows a slice of the temple's interior garden, green and growing and incongruously alive in the middle of a detention level. He looks at it without seeing it. Palpatine's force concealment, Vader says. The technique. What does it require to break? Proximity and intent, Dooku says. You cannot sense what you are not actively looking for. Most Jedi spend their careers not looking for that particular shape of darkness because they have no framework for it. A Sith Master in the Senate building is outside the scope of what they consider possible. But someone with the framework, someone who knew what they were sensing, yes, the concealment would hold against passive awareness. It would not hold against directed attention from a sufficiently powerful presence. Dooku looks at him. How powerful are you, precisely? Vader turns from the viewport. Powerful enough, he says. He moves to the door, keys the panel to reopen it. Pauses. You told us Palpatine's name, Vader says without turning. On Geonosis. You didn't have to. No, Dooku agrees. Why? The question sits in the cell. Dooku considers it with the unhurried attention of a man who has had 16 hours to find the honest answer, and has located it somewhere in the long archaeology of his own choices. Because I was a Jedi, Dooku says, before I was anything else. And some part of that, some very small, very stubborn part, appears to have survived what I did to it. He pauses. I find that surprising. I don't, Vader says. He steps through the door. Behind him, Dooku is still sitting in the precise center of his cell with his hands in his lap and his eyes on the middle distance, and the expression on his face is one that has no clean name. Something between grief and relief, and the specific exhaustion of a man who has been carrying a very heavy thing for a very long time, and has finally, in the last possible hour, set it down. Outside in the corridor, Mace Windu is waiting. He has been there for some time. Arms folded, the flat, hard patience of a man who does not enjoy being excluded from conversations, and has decided to express this through posture rather than language. He looks at Vader with the expression he has been perfecting since Geonosis, the one that is not quite suspicion and not quite respect, and holds both with the tension of a man who has not yet decided which one wins. You disabled the monitoring system, Mace says. Temporarily, Vader says. That's not. He'll testify. Vader says. Full account. Palpatine's identity, the Sith chain of command, the clone commission, Sifo Dyas, the war architecture, all of it. He meets Windu's eyes. He'll testify, because he chose to. Not because we pressured him. That distinction matters when it reaches the Senate. Mace looks at the closed cell door for a long moment. You went in there to give him the choice, Mace says. Yes, another silence. The kind that Mace Windu inhabits comfortably, which is one of the things Vader has always respected about him and never said. The council meets at dawn, Mace says finally. I'll be there, Vader says. He walks toward the elevator. Behind him the detention level holds its silence and its light, and its single occupant. And Dooku sits in the center of his cell and breathes, and outside the temple, the city burns its permanent fire, against the Coruscant dark. Dawn is 4 hours away. There is work to do. Camino, the ocean planet receiving its permanent rain. The cloning facilities lit from within, warm amber against the gray assault of the water. The entire structure a monument to patience. Years of biological engineering, decades of careful cultivation, 200,000 lives grown in tanks and trained in simulators, and prepared for a war that was designed around their eventual betrayal. The Nulls know something is wrong before the shuttle lands. Clone commandos, the Null Arcs, the first batch, the ones grown before the process was fully standardized, and who came out the other side of that imperfection with something the Kaminoans didn't intend, and couldn't fully measure. Independent cognition. Situational skepticism. The capacity to look at an order and ask why before executing it, which is not a trait the original commission requested, and which Vader has been counting on since Coruscant. Ordo meets him at the landing platform. The rain is immediate and total. Within 3 seconds of stepping off the shuttle, Vader is soaked through, which the Kaminoan atmosphere produces with the indifferent efficiency of a system that doesn't care about the comfort of its visitors. Ordo stands in it without apparent concern, his Mandalorian armor shedding the water in sheets, his helmet angled with the specific attention of a soldier reading a new variable. Jedi, Ordo says. Acknowledgement, not greeting. I need to speak with Taun We, Vader says. And then I need access to the medical facilities. Medical facilities aren't on the standard Jedi access clearance. No, Vader agrees. They're not. Ordo looks at him. The visor reveals nothing but the soldier behind it is running calculations. The clone arcs are always running calculations. It is the thing that makes them exceptional and occasionally inconvenient. And Ordo in particular has a reputation among those who know him for asking the questions that his superiors would prefer he didn't think of. You know about the chips, Ordo says. Not a question. Vader looks at him through the rain. Yes, the silence between them is occupied entirely by the sound of water on Durasteel and the distant processing hum of the facility and the particular quality of a moment where two people establish, without saying it directly, that they are on the same side of a line that hasn't been officially drawn yet. How many of the nulls know? Vader says. All of us, Ordo says. We found them during a standard medical scan 8 months ago. Foreign implants, Kaminoan manufacture, in a location that serves no standard neurological function. He pauses. We didn't report it. Because you didn't know who commissioned them. Because we didn't know who we could trust with the question. Ordo's helmet tilts slightly. Who do you trust, Jedi? Fewer people than I once did, Vader says. More than I did yesterday. Ordo considers this with the compressed efficiency of a man who makes decisions quickly and well. Then he turns toward the facility entrance. Come inside, Ordo says. You're getting the general wet. Camino, medical level 7. The cloning tanks stretch in rows beyond the range of comfortable comprehension, each one holding a life at some stage of its development, the amber fluid catching the overhead lights and turning everything inside it gold. It smells of antiseptic and something biological beneath that, the particular scent of accelerated growth that Vader associates with nothing pleasant. Taun We is waiting at the medical station. The Kaminoan is 2.5 meters of elegant biological engineering, in her own right, long-necked, large-eyed, possessed of the serene administrative affect of a species that has been in the business of creating life for so long that it no longer registers as remarkable. She folds her hands when Vader enters, and inclines her head with the precise degree of courtesy appropriate for a Jedi Master, which he is not, but which the temple authorization codes Obi-Wan transmitted this morning suggest he is adjacent to. Master Jedi, Taun We says. This is an unusual request. The inhibitor chips, Vader says. I need the surgical specifications. The Serenity develops a single hairline fracture. Not emotion. Kaminoans manage emotion with the same efficiency they manage everything else, but the specific recalibration of a professional who has received a question from outside the expected parameter set. The behavioral modification chips are a standard component of the growth protocol, Taun We says. Commissioned as part of the original order specification. Commissioned by whom? Specifically, the original commission was placed by Sifo Dyas, Vader says. A Jedi Master who died before the commission was placed, which means someone used his identity and his Senate access codes to order an army with a hidden detonator built into every soldier. He pauses. You knew the commission was irregular. Taun We is quiet. You are very good at what you do, Vader says, which means you looked at the chip specifications and understood what they were for. And you fulfilled the commission anyway, because Kamino's economy depends on this contract, and the question of what the chips do is, from a purely Kaminoan perspective, not your operational concern. The large eyes blink once. Slowly, the surgical specifications, Taun We says, are available in the medical archive. Section 7. Subsection D. She pauses. Removal is theoretically possible. It has not been attempted on a living subject. It has now, Ordo says from the doorway. They start with the nulls. 6 soldiers. The procedure takes 4 hours per subject, because the chips are positioned with the specific malice of designers who understood that a difficult removal process would discourage discovery, threaded alongside neural tissue in a location where a standard medical scanner reads them as biological structure rather than foreign implant. The Kaminoan surgeon assigned to the procedure requires direction on 3 separate occasions, not from incompetence, but from the discomfort of a professional who has been asked to undo her own institution's work. Vader doesn't leave the medical level. He stands at the observation window through all 6 procedures, watching with the attention of a man who has a great deal riding on the outcome and who has learned, across a lifetime of catastrophic losses, that outcomes require witnesses. that things left unobserved have a tendency to resolve in the worst available direction. Between procedures he transmits to Obi-Wan. Brief, encrypted, routed through the Jedi Temple's most secure channel. The council session went as planned. Dooku's testimony, corroborated by the saber dart chain and the Sifo-Dyas documentation, has moved from the council chamber to a sealed Senate committee whose membership Mace spent 3 hours vetting for Palpatine's influence. The Chancellor has been informed that a major security matter is under investigation. He has expressed, through his office, full cooperation. Vader reads that line twice. Full cooperation. The exact posture of a man who has been running this game for decades and understands that when the board configuration shifts, you don't panic. You smile and express full cooperation and begin activating your contingencies. He transmits back, accelerate the committee timeline. Every day Palpatine has is a day he uses. Obi-Wan's reply comes in under 2 minutes. Understood. Windu is handling it. The 6th null comes out of the procedure at the 19th hour. Ordo is there for all of them, present in the medical bay through every surgery. Standing with his arms folded and his helmet off for the first time since Vader arrived, his face the face of a man who is approximately 30 years old in body and considerably older in the way he holds whatever he is feeling about what is happening in this room. The chips are in a sealed container on the medical station. 6 small devices. Kamino and manufacture. Each one a perfect piece of engineering designed to receive a signal that has not yet been sent and will not, now, be received by these 6 soldiers regardless of what Palpatine transmits. Vader picks up the container. Can you reach the other arcs? Vader says. The Alpha batch. Some, Ordo says. The ones deployed with Jedi generals I can reach through those channels. The ones on independent operations? He shakes his head. It will take time. How much? Weeks. Maybe a month for full coverage of the named arcs. He pauses. The regular troops 200,000 units across facilities on 3 planets. That's not weeks. That's a different problem entirely. I know, Vader says. The regular troops need a different solution. Which is? Vader sets the container down. Looks at the 6 chips through the clear seal of the medical case. 6 down. 200,000 to go, the arithmetic of the impossible, which is the only arithmetic that has ever applied to anything he's cared about. The Chancellor's emergency powers, Vader says. He was going to use them to start the war. We use them first. A Senate resolution authorizing mandatory medical review of all clone units, framed as a response to the Geonosian operation. Standard post-battle health assessment. Nobody questions it because nobody knows what they're looking for. Ordo looks at him. You're going to use Palpatine's own legal architecture against him, Ordo says. Yes, Vader says, while he's sitting in the Senate building watching it happen. Yes, the Null Arc commander is quiet for a moment. Then something moves across his face that is not quite a smile, but occupies the same general territory. I want to be in the room when he realizes, Ordo says. Get in line, Vader says. Outside the facility, Kamino's reign continues its permanent assault on a planet that has decided indifference is the appropriate response to weather. The cloning tanks hold their cargo in amber stillness. The chips are in their container. The nulls are in recovery, their cognition intact, their compliance subroutines permanently offline. 200,000 soldiers are still waiting. The Senate resolution is 14 hours away. Palpatine doesn't know about Kamino yet. He will. Coruscant. The Senate building at mid-morning. The rotunda filling with the ambient noise of 500 delegations beginning their day. The shuffle of aides. The murmur of procedural preparation. The particular bureaucratic hum of a government that believes itself to be operating normally. The Chancellor's office sits above all of it. Curved windows overlooking the city, old wood and older ambition. Palpatine has not slept. This is not visible to anyone who enters the office. It would not be visible to anyone who has not spent decades studying the specific performance of Sheev Palpatine in the act of being something other than what he is. The presentation is immaculate. The robes, the posture, the expression of measured concern appropriate for a chancellor receiving difficult intelligence about a security investigation he has officially endorsed. The hands folded on the desk. The attentive eyes. Beneath the presentation, the machinery is running at a temperature it was not designed to sustain. He received the Geonosis report 4 days ago. An extraction team neutralized before reaching Dooku. Dooku in Jedi custody. The Padawan, Skywalker, 19 years old, exceptional midi-chlorian count, the candidate, moving through every scene with the precision of someone following a map that should not exist. The saber dart chain. The Sifo Dyas documentation. The sealed Senate committee. Each item arrived like a move in a dejarik game played by an opponent who knows his strategy. Which is impossible. He has run the available explanations 17 times in 16 hours. Force vision, possible, but force visions of this specificity and operational utility have no precedent in Jedi or Sith methodology. Jedi intelligence operation, possible, but the chain of discovery is too clean, too fast, too precisely targeted at the exact vulnerabilities that a Jedi intelligence apparatus would not know to target. A second Sith, possible, but the dark side would have announced it, and what he senses from Skywalker is not the dark side. What he senses from Skywalker is nothing. That is the problem. That is the specific thing that has kept Darth Sidious awake through a Coruscant night that he spent performing sleep for the benefit of his household staff. The boy is a black space in the Force, not the darkness of the dark side, not the concealment of a trained practitioner, but an absence. A void. A presence so thoroughly guarded that even Palpatine's directed attention finds nothing to grip. In 40 years of Sith practice, he has encountered this once. In himself. Mas Amidala enters at the 9th hour with the morning briefing, which Palpatine receives in the practiced posture of a man for whom morning briefings are the primary texture of his existence. Amidala moves through the items with administrative efficiency, trade route disputes, a taxation motion from the Commerce Guild, the Outer Rim security assessment. Then he reaches the Camino item. The Jedi have requested Senate authorization for a medical review of all clone units currently in service, Amidala says. Filed under Emergency Health and Welfare Protocols. The motion has been co-sponsored by 12 senators and is scheduled for floor vote this afternoon. Palpatine looks at the document Amidala sets before him. His face does not change. Below the face, something tears. Not dramatically. Not with the operatic quality of a lesser man's response to catastrophe. Something tears the way structural material tears, quietly, under pressure, revealing that the load it was bearing was always more than the rated capacity. He reads the motion language with the attention of a man who wrote most of the Senate's emergency protocol architecture and therefore recognizes, in this document, the exact provisions he designed for his own eventual use. They are being used against him. By someone who read the same blueprints. Express my full support, Palpatine says. The health of our clone forces is a Republic priority. Amidala nods and withdraws. The first transmission goes to the contingency contact. Not Dooku. Dooku is unavailable in the most permanent sense that custody allows, but the secondary layer, the one Palpatine has maintained since the early years of this operation on the principle that redundancy is the only form of security available to a man who cannot trust anyone. The contact does not have Dooku's capability or his information. What he has is reach, the specific reach of a man embedded in the Senate's administrative infrastructure, who can move certain things without the movement being traced to its source. The contact's response arrives in 11 minutes. The committee proceedings have been sealed. Not standard sealed, the classification level applied to the Dooku testimony files is above anything Palpatine placed there himself, which means someone with council-level clearance made a deliberate choice about what he would and would not be able to access through his standard channels. Mace Windu's authorization codes are on the classification order. Windu, who has suspected him for years, who has never had cause, who now, apparently, has cause. Palpatine stands from his desk. He walks to the curved window and looks out at Coruscant, the city he has been maneuvering toward his control for 20 years, the government he has spent a lifetime infiltrating from the inside, the republic whose mechanisms he understands better than any living being because he helped design them for this purpose. He looks at it the way a man looks at a thing he built when the thing begins to exhibit behavior he did not program. He needs to understand what Skywalker is. Not who, what. The who is documented. Shmi Skywalker's son. Tatooine, Watto's slave. Qui-Gon's discovery. Obi-Wan's apprentice. The highest midi-chlorian count ever recorded, and the most promising dark side candidate in a generation. He knows the who. He built a relationship with the who across 3 years of careful cultivation, positioned himself as the mentor, the confidant, the man who saw the boy's potential when the Jedi Council expressed only reservation. The what is new. The what walked through Geonosis like a man who had already been there. The what moved through his carefully constructed war architecture like a hand moving through smoke, not fighting it, not even acknowledging it, simply passing through and leaving it disrupted behind him. The what looked at the extraction team Palpatine sent and let 2 of them escape because he wanted them to report back, because he wanted Palpatine to know that he knew. The Chancellor's hands are clasped behind his back. This is not their usual position. Usually his hands are visible, on the desk, in gesture, deployed in the deliberate semaphore of a man who understands that physical openness communicates trustworthiness. The hands behind his back are a private thing, a thing he allows himself only in rooms where no one is watching. The contingency requires activation. Not the full contingency. Order 66 is unavailable now, neutralized on Camino by a Senate motion he is publicly supporting, because the alternative is to oppose it and reveal that he knows what the chips are for. The Clone Wars cannot begin on Geonosis because Geonosis is resolved, and Dooku is in a cell, and the Separatist command structure has lost its head. The 20-year plan has sustained catastrophic damage across a 72-hour window. He needs a new plan. The old one is not recoverable. He understands this with the clarity of a Sith master who has spent 40 years training himself to see situations without the distortion of preference. The situation has changed. Fighting to restore the original architecture is the error a lesser strategist would make. The correct response is to identify what remains available and build from what is actually there. What remains? His Senate majority, intact, for now, before the committee findings become public. His administrative authority, intact, for the same duration. His personal capability, unchanged, undetected, the dark side of the Force still at his full command, 40 years of Sith mastery, that no 19-year-old Padawan, regardless of what he knows or who he has been, can match, in direct confrontation. The office door opens. He turns from the window with the expression of full cooperation already in place. Vader is standing in the doorway. Alone. No Obi-Wan. No temple escort. Just Anakin Skywalker in Jedi robes, standing at the threshold of the Chancellor's office with his hands at his sides and his face, carrying the particular stillness that Palpatine has been trying to read for 4 days, and finding, each time, nothing that the 40 years of study provides a framework for. Anakin, Palpatine says warmly. What a pleasant I know what you are, Vader says. The sentence lands in the office like a physical object. Palpatine receives it with the controlled absorption of a man who has spent a lifetime managing moments exactly like this, and who understands that the response to a direct accusation is never direct defense. It is warmth. Confusion. The performance of a trusted mentor confronting an inexplicable betrayal. He begins the performance. Anakin, Palpatine says gently, I don't know what. Don't, Vader says. One word. Quiet. Carrying the absolute weight of a man who has heard every variation of every lie this person is capable of constructing, and is not interested in any of them. Palpatine stops. For the first time in 40 years of Sith practice, Darth Sidious stops performing and simply looks at what is in front of him. The boy looks back. And in the space between them, in the Chancellor's office above the Senate rotunda, the mask comes off. Not dramatically. Not with the operatic reveal of a man who wanted to be discovered. With the quiet, deliberate removal of something that has simply become unnecessary, the moment a predator stops pretending to be something else, because the prey already knows. And the only question remaining is what happens next. The yellow eyes surface slowly beneath the blue. Well, Sidious says. The voice is his real voice now. The graveled, ancient register that the Chancellor's warm tenor has been covering for 20 years. Here we are. Here we are, Vader says. Outside the curved windows, Coruscant continues its permanent motion. The Senate prepares for its afternoon vote. The committee sits in sealed session. On Camino, 200,000 soldiers are being scheduled for medical review. In the Chancellor's office, the endgame begins. The Chancellor's office. The curved windows. The old wood. The city burning its permanent light beyond the glass, indifferent to what is happening inside this room. The Senate preparing its vote. The traffic moving in its endless channels. Coruscant conducting the ordinary business of a civilization that does not yet know it has just been saved. 2 men. 1 truth. No more performance. Sidious does not reach for a weapon. That is the first thing Vader notes, and it tells him everything about where the next 10 minutes go. A man who reaches for a weapon believes the confrontation is physical. A man who stands with his hands visible and his yellow eyes steady and his ancient face arranged into something that is not quite calm, but is adjacent to it. That man believes he still has moves available that do not require a lightsaber. He is wrong. But he doesn't know that yet. You should have died on the Death Star, Sidious says. Not an accusation. An observation. The specific curiosity of a strategist examining an anomaly that shouldn't exist. My apprentice. My greatest failure and my greatest achievement, depending on the accounting. The ancient voice carries something that is almost appreciation. And yet, here you are. In that body. With all of that knowledge. He tilts his head. How long have you been planning this moment? Since the elevator, Vader says. 72 hours. Sidious considers it. You dismantled 20 years of architecture in 72 hours. You built it to be dismantled from the inside. That was always the vulnerability. Everything depended on no one knowing the full picture. Vader pauses. I know the full picture. Yes, Sidious says. You do. He moves, not toward Vader. Laterally. The slow, deliberate movement of a man thinking with his body, circling the desk with his hands still visible, which creates a problem for both of us. Because you cannot put me in a Jedi cell, Anakin. You know what I am capable of. You know what I will do to anyone who attempts to contain me. The yellow eyes are steady. The Council is not equipped for this. Windu is not equipped for this. Whatever committee Kenobi has been feeding evidence to, none of them have ever faced a Sith Master in full capacity. I have, Vader says. The movement stops. Sidious looks at him across the desk with the full, undivided attention of a being who has spent 40 years seeing further than everyone around him, and who is now, for the first time, looking at someone who sees just as far. Yes, Sidious says quietly. You have. The lightning comes without further warning. It fills the office. Blue-white, the specific cold fire of Sith lightning at full output, deployed without the theatrical buildup of a man who expects his target to be unprepared. Sidious does not perform. He attacks, full capacity, the first strike carrying the complete weight of 40 years of dark side mastery, aimed at a body that is 19 years old and has been back in this timeline for 72 hours. Vader's hand comes up. The force forms between his palm and the lightning with the solidity of something physical, not blocking in the Jedi sense, not deflecting, but absorbing, taking the full current into the field and holding it there with the specific technique he spent years developing inside the suit, because the suit couldn't survive deflection and his body couldn't survive contact, and necessity is the only teacher that never softens its lessons. He holds it for 3 seconds. Then, he redirects it. Not back at Sidious, at the desk. The ancient wood ignites. The files and the documents and 20 years of carefully maintained administrative cover burn with the particular enthusiasm of things that were always kindling, waiting for a source. Sidious moves through the smoke without hesitation, the second strike coming from a different angle, lower, aimed at the legs, the tactical intelligence of a master who understands that immobility is the prerequisite for everything else. Vader steps left. The lightning takes the chair behind him. He closes the distance by 6 meters in the movement, crossing the space between them while Sidious is still completing the arc of the second strike, and when he arrives he is inside the range where lightning becomes impractical, and the confrontation becomes something else. Sidious draws his lightsaber. Vader draws his. The blades meet. What follows is not long. That is the truth of it that the mythology always obscured. The version of this fight that would have happened in the other timeline, if there had been one, would have been brief, because the gap in their capability was never as wide as Sidious preferred Vader to believe. The suit limited him. The grief limited him. The architecture of servitude that Sidious spent 20 years constructing around his apprentice limited him in ways that had nothing to do with midi-chlorians or lightsaber technique. None of those limitations are present now. Vader fights with both hands and a whole body, and the complete strategic intelligence of a man who studied Sidious for 2 decades, and who has the additional advantage of fighting without the need to protect anything. No suit to preserve, no breathing to maintain, no rage distorting the read of incoming attacks. He is clear in a way he has not been since before he became what the dark side made him. Sidious fights with everything he has. It is considerable. It is not enough. The end comes when Vader takes the lightsaber, not with his own blade but with the Force, the same telekinetic grip he used on Zam Wesell's weapon in the Outlander Club. Applied with surgical precision to the hilt rather than the blade. The curved handle tears from Sidious's hand. Vader catches it. Both blades at his sides now. Sidious stands in the burning office with his hands empty. The yellow eyes do not show fear. They show, instead, the specific expression of a man making a final calculation and arriving at a result he does not prefer. "Finish it," Sidious says. "No," Vader says. The word lands between them like a door closing. Sidious looks at him. "You're not going to kill me. The Senate committee has your name. Dooku's testimony is sealed and copied to 6 separate secure locations. The evidence chain exists independent of whether you live or die." Vader looks at the man who was his master and his destroyer and the architect of everything he lost, and what he feels is not the clean fire of victory and not the cold weight of grief. Something quieter than either. Something that has no name yet, but feels like the first day of a long recovery. If I kill you, you become the thing they argue about. The story they can't prove. I need you alive and in front of the Senate, so that what you are is a fact instead of a theory. Sidious is very still. That requires you to trust the Senate, Sidious says. The institution I spent 20 years corrupting. The institution that still has more honest members than you managed to replace, Vader says. I counted. The office burns around them. The smoke is thick now, and the sprinkler system has activated. Water mixing with ash. The old wood hissing as 20 years of careful ambition turns to gray sediment on the floor. Through the curved windows the city continues, oblivious, a government in the rotunda below preparing to vote on a medical review of clone soldiers. Unaware that the man who planted the chips is standing in his own burning office, with 2 lightsabers aimed at him and nowhere left to move. Vader reaches for his comm. "Obi-Wan," he says. Ready. Obi-Wan's voice comes back immediately. He has been outside the building for 11 minutes. "Bring Windu." Mace Windu arrives with 4 temple guards, and the expression of a man who has been waiting for this specific moment for years, and is experiencing the particular satisfaction of justified suspicion confirmed. He looks at the burning office, and the empty-handed Sidious and the 2 lightsabers at Vader's sides, and says nothing for a long moment. Then, he produces binders, the same model used on Dooku. The irony is not lost on anyone in the room. Sidious submits with the dignity of a man who has decided that everything from this moment forward is performance for a different audience. The Senate, the courts, the historical record. The yellow eyes are gone, the blue returning with the practiced ease of a transformation that has been made 10,000 times. The Chancellor's face, composed and cooperative, assembling itself over what is underneath with the automatic precision of a mask that has been worn so long it no longer requires conscious effort. Vader watches him and is not fooled, and does not need to be. Obi-Wan stands beside him as the guards lead Sidious out. The corridor swallows them. The sound of footsteps fades. The burning office settles into the quiet industry of its own destruction, water running across old wood, ash drifting in the sprinkler current, the smell of smoke and wet stone filling the space where a man constructed an empire and found, at the end, that the construction had been witnessed. "It's done," Obi-Wan says. "The trial isn't done," Vader says. "The Senate vote isn't done. The chip removal isn't done. Dooku's full testimony, Anakin." The voice is quiet. The voice Obi-Wan uses when he is not instructing but simply speaking as himself. It's done. Vader looks at the doorway where Sidious was. At the burning desk. At the water running across old wood and old ambition, and 20 years of careful architecture turning to ash in an office above a Senate that is still. Improbably. Standing, he breathes. Yes, Vader says. It is. Outside, Coruscant holds its permanent light against a sky that is beginning to show the first pale suggestion of evening. The Senate Rotunda casts its dome against the cityscape. The spires of the Jedi Temple rise in the middle distance, ancient and intact. Somewhere in the city, a woman named Padmé Amidala is reading the preliminary committee findings and understanding, with the precise political intelligence that Vader forgot to account for, and is glad he did not have to, exactly what they mean. Somewhere on Tatooine, a moisture farmer's homestead sits in the twin sun afternoon, its perimeter intact, its occupants alive. The force is very quiet. Not empty, never empty, but the specific quality of quiet that follows the removal of something that has been pressing against it for a very long time. A pressure released. A shadow lifted. Vader stands in the doorway of the burning office and feels it. He breathes in. He breathes out. The galaxy does not know yet what it has been given back. It will take time, the trial, the Senate sessions, the slow work of dismantling what Sidious built and replacing it with something that might hold. It will require every skill he has, and patience he is still learning, and people he trusts with a completeness that still costs him something every time he allows it. But the shadow is gone. And he is breathing. That, for now, is everything. Tatooine, 3 months after the arrest. The twin suns going down behind the Jundland wastes in the particular way they do on clear evenings. Not fading, but descending, dropping below the horizon with the decisive finality of something that has completed its work and does not linger. The Lars homestead is quieter than it was. Not empty. Shmi is still here, which is the fact that matters most, which is the fact that still costs him something every time he confirms it. A pressure behind the sternum that is not grief, but its opposite. Relief so chronic it has stopped feeling like relief and started feeling like a new kind of breathing. She is inside at this hour, helping Beru with the evening preparation. Moving through the domestic architecture of the homestead with the unhurried competence of a woman who has rebuilt her life from nothing twice, and understands that the third time is not a given, and is therefore something to be treated carefully. Owen is at the vaporators. He doesn't acknowledge Vader's presence on the roof. This is Owen's version of acceptance, not warmth, not welcome, but the deliberate choice not to make something difficult that he has decided to allow. It is more than Vader expected, and he does not push it further. He climbs the exterior ladder to the upper platform. Luke is already up there. The boy is 8 years old. That is the fact the galaxy hasn't caught up to yet. That somewhere in the aftermath of Palpatine's arrest and the Senate's slow, grinding reckoning with everything Sidious built, a child on Tatooine has been growing up in a homestead with a grandmother who is alive, and an uncle who is difficult, and a father who appears at irregular intervals and sits on the roof, and doesn't explain himself, and Luke, being Luke, has decided that this is simply one of the conditions of his particular existence, and has arranged himself accordingly. He is sitting on the roof's edge with his legs hanging over the side, and his face turned up toward the first stars coming through. He doesn't look back when Vader reaches the platform. He already knew he was coming. He has always known. The Force in him is not trained, not named, not understood by him in any terms beyond the fact that he sometimes knows things before they happen, and sometimes feels things from people before they speak, and nobody in the homestead has told him what that means yet, because Vader has not yet decided how to tell him. He sits beside his son on the roof's edge. Below them the desert floor stretches in every direction, cooling now as the suns complete their descent, the sand shifting from copper to the pale silver blue that Tatooine wears at night like a different skin. The homestead lights are coming on in the rooms below. The smell of the evening meal is moving up through the ventilation. They sit for a while without speaking. This is one of the things Vader has learned about Luke, in these 3 months of irregular visits and careful navigation, that the boy is not uncomfortable with silence. He inhabits it the way he inhabits the desert, which is to say without resistance, with the particular ease of something that grew up inside a thing and therefore does not register it as a condition. "Will I see you again?" Luke says. Not "when are you leaving?" Not "are you staying?" The question he actually has, delivered in the direct, unstrategic way of a child who has not yet learned to approach what he wants from an angle. Vader looks at his son on the roof's edge in the starlight, at the sharp angles and the sun-bleached hair, and the eyes that hold contact without strategy, that look at whatever is in front of them with the directness that does not know how to be anything else. He looks at the boy who is going to become something the galaxy needs and does not yet have words for. "Yes," Vader says. One word. Completely true. The most complicated, simple answer he has ever given. Luke nods. He looks back at the stars. After a moment he holds the lightsaber out. "Ahsoka says I should keep it," he says. "She says a Jedi's weapon is his own." "She's right," Vader says. Luke clips it to his belt. He sits with his legs over the edge of the roof and the stars overhead and the desert cooling below and whatever future is assembling itself in the dark beyond the light of what they can currently see. Vader stands. He moves to the access hatch. At the threshold he stops. He doesn't need to say anything else. Everything necessary has been said. In the working office, in the throne room that no longer exists, on the boarding ramp of the Tantive 4 where nobody died and everything changed. The story has run its course from crisis to something that, while not peace exactly, is the ground from which peace becomes possible. He goes back down through the homestead, past Owen's crossed arms and Beru's steady hands, out into the desert night where Ahsoka is waiting by her ship. She looks at him once. She nods. He nods back. She has been here for 2 days. That is new, not the visit. She has been to the homestead 4 times since Coruscant, but the duration. 2 days with Shmi at the table, and Owen in the workshop and Luke, following her around the perimeter, asking questions she answers with the patient economy of a woman who has been teaching things for most of her adult life and knows which questions to answer directly, and which ones to let the student reach themselves. Vader has not asked her why she stays as long as she does. He knows why. There are things the homestead provides that he cannot provide. Continuity, consistency, the particular daily texture of people who are simply present without agenda. He appears at intervals, which is not the same thing, which he understands is not the same thing, and the understanding sits in him without resolution, because the alternative is a different kind of life than the one currently required, and they are not at that stage yet. Perhaps they will be. The future is not what it was. The future is genuinely open in a way he has no precedent for navigating, and he is learning to treat that as what it is, not a problem to solve, but a condition to inhabit. One day at a time. He was told that once, by a man in a desert hut, in a version of events that no longer applies. He carries it anyway. He walks up his own ramp. The shuttle lifts. Below, the Lars homestead diminishes against the desert floor. A small structure, functional, worn at the edges, containing exactly what it needs to contain. He doesn't watch it go. He sits in the shuttle's forward seat and looks at the stars coming up through the viewport, as Tatooine's gravity releases the ship into the dark, and he breathes his own air. And he lets the coal in his chest be what it is, not gone, not resolved, not converted into something cleaner. Present. Carried. Part of the weight that makes the structure real. The trial is ongoing. That is the current texture of Coruscant. The Senate in perpetual session. The evidence chain moving through committees with the grinding patience of institutions, reckoning with something that exceeds their normal vocabulary. Dooku is testifying in installments, each one landing in the chamber like a stone dropped into still water. The ripples reaching further than anyone anticipated because the architecture of what Sidious built is so large that each new disclosure recontextualizes the last decade of galactic history for the people who lived through it, without knowing what was happening. Obi-Wan is there. He is always there now, present in the committee rooms, in the council chambers, in the quiet conversations that are doing the actual work beneath the visible proceedings. He has become, in the 3 months since Geonosis, something that the Jedi Order didn't have a formal category for, and is slowly building one around him, the man who knows the shape of the thing they are dismantling, and can tell them where the load-bearing elements are. They talk every few days. The conversations are not long. They do not need to be long. There is a specific efficiency that develops between people who have said the important things and no longer need to find the shape of each other before they can be useful. And Vader and Obi-Wan have arrived at that place, with the slightly startled quality of two men who expected the road to be longer and found themselves further along it than anticipated. Progress, Obi-Wan said last week, is not always comfortable even when it is unambiguously good. Vader told him he sounded like Yoda. Obi-Wan said he had been spending a great deal of time with Yoda and was beginning to suspect it was contagious. It was the closest thing to a normal conversation they have had in 23 years, and it cost Vader nothing, and gave him something he doesn't have a word for yet, but intends to keep. The stars are steady through the viewport. He thinks about Luke on the roof, the lightsaber clipped to an 8-year-old's belt with the casual ownership of a boy who doesn't know yet what it means to carry one, and will learn, gradually in his own time, in a galaxy that is less dark than the one it was 3 months ago. Not safe. Not finished. The work of making something better out of the ruin of something worse is long, and requires people who are willing to be in it for the duration, and there are no guarantees, and the Force does not offer guarantees, and he has made his peace with that in the specific way that a man makes peace with something, not by resolving it but by deciding to proceed anyway. He thinks about Shmi at the table, the needle in her hand, the mended cloth, the particular quality of her attention when she asked him if he was all right, which was not a question about the immediate moment, but about the whole of it, the accumulated weight of everything he carried in, and everything he was trying to set down, and the distance between those two things, and whether the distance was closing. "I will be," he told her. He thinks it is true. He thinks it is the kind of true that requires the work to make it true, not a statement of current fact but a direction of travel. A thing that is true in the way that a destination is true before you arrive, which is to say real, and not yet reached, and worth moving toward. The ship moves through the dark. Below, Tatooine has become a point of light among other points of light, the twin suns long set. The planet itself just another element of the dark between stars, indistinguishable from this distance from anything else that burns quietly in the night. He knows it is there. That is enough. Coruscant, in 4 hours. The trial in the morning. Obi-Wan in the afternoon. The long patient work of building something from the evidence of what was nearly lost, which is the only material any of them have to work with, and which turns out, when you look at it honestly, to be more than enough. He settles in the seat. He closes his eyes. He breathes. The stars hold. Let us know what you'd like to see next. The end.